I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, and possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, my friend Liam. And thank you, listener, for tuning into the Oracles with James Tyson. It is I, James Tyson, and today I bring you a friend of mine, Sarazen Brooks. Sarazen is a artist. If you go to her website, sarazenbrooks.com, and that's S-A-R-A-Z-E-N, or if you live where I do, S-A-R-A-Z-E-N, Brooks, sarazenbrooks.com. Check out her series, The Infinite Universe. It is absolutely beautiful, what she's painted. She's been an artist for a long time. Started off wanting to go off into a medical career, and through some adventurous misadventures, she found herself as a very talented and expanding artist. I'm kind of bringing her on here kicking and screaming because I want to talk to her about a book she put out. And it's called Why Am I Here? A Near-Death Experience with the Ancient of Days. And now, this is a true story of her out-of-body journey and through time. And we'll touch on traveling through time. It's very, very unique. It's the first volume in the Blue Book series that she's putting together. And it's been described as spellbinding recapitulation of an experience she had in 2009. Basically, it shook her whole concept of reality right to the core. It involved the first of her 2 near-death experiences to come within the next few years. And this journey began to push the boundaries of time and space. And it began with an encounter with her spirit guide, provided her with an inspiring series of lessons, pretty much good news for the soul. Sarazen is still an oil painter. She has moved from the lower left Canadian coast here where I am out to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Alberta. And it's been a cold day where she is. And I keep thinking I was cold here on the west coast with that dampness coming in. But, you know, minus 20, minus 10. Oh, yeah, we're talking Celsius. Sorry about that. But she's in a dry cold. I'm in a damp cold. Sarazen, how are you today?
I'm doing phenomenal. How are you?
I am doing adequately. I am waiting for rain. Typical. It's a really sunny day out here on the lower left coast, where you used to live, and it's we get rain forecast. But up in the mountains where you are, it's either sunny or snowy this time of year.
Yes, that's very accurate, and we've had both today so far.
Oh, well, you can have the snow. I just bought a new motorcycle, and that's for you up there to deal with. I used to be a Mountie in Alberta. I know what it's like. It's and that kind of snow is dry. It is funny where I used to work. It didn't melt. It would just disappear, and there were no puddles or anything. It just was gone.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're very familiar then.
Oh yes, I am. Actually, I have friends of mine who are down Crow's Nest Pass and Canmore area around the Calgary and that good southern chunk. But when the sun's out on that snow, holy cow, it's beautiful, beautiful, clear, sunny times.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things, like, I've followed you as an artist and again, that sounds really creepy, but followed you as an artist for a few years now. And I was surprised in popping over onto one of the social media pages a while ago, it was a year or so ago, or whenever your book came out, that you actually had an overly spiritual side to you. Your book, Why I'm Here, a Near-Death Experience with the Ancient of Days, is absolutely fascinating to me. Give my listener a little bit of an idea of who you are. Didn't you go to university to become a kinesiologist at one point?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, life has had... I feel like I've kind of lived 6 or 7 lifetimes in my short life so far. I always was an artist growing up. My whole family is artists, and at the last minute in high school, I got talked out of going to art school. And instead, I kind of took a left turn and I went into my second favorite passion, which was medicine and biology and mostly physics. So I did college for 3.5 years before I was going to go into pre-med. And I kind of hit this wall where I was so spiritually and artistically unsatisfied that I just couldn't do it anymore. And I got turned on to this documentary called Basquiat, which was the first American Black graffiti artist who invented graffiti. And after watching that movie, I dropped out of my profession that day, same day. So that's kind of where my path as an artist started, and things came together very quickly from there. I would say I was always a spiritual person. My mom was spiritual growing up, and she taught me a lot of things about how the way the world worked and different cosmic laws. But, you know, spiritual awakening really happens in phases as a person is ready to wake up. And it turned out that I just so happened to be very behind on my plan for my life at that time. I didn't know that. I think I probably took about a 6-year detour, and that was about the time that I went to college and a little bit after that. So basically what happened was I had already come to the conclusion that I wasn't supposed to be an orthopedic surgeon, and I was going to college and working 3 jobs. So you could imagine that my life in my 20s, I was basically running on no sleep and lots of caffeine. So after I left school, I cut down the different jobs that I had to kind of go at an easier pace. And I went to my job that was paying me the most, which was working at a casual fine dining restaurant in White Rock. And White Rock has some pretty powerful magical energies there. If you're familiar with the Washington Avenue Grill, it is actually built on native land, and it's been on Creepy Canada, all sorts of different shows. And there's lots of different stories about what's happened in that house, that restaurant. And working there myself, I can also testify that late at night when we were cleaning up, there was definitely like strong, oppressive energy that didn't necessarily feel good. Some staff reported things flying around. Things falling from like kitchen pans falling across the room and just creepy things like that. Mm-hmm. Anyways, none of that is really a part of the main story, other than just to say that that particular location where I was working was kind of like a higher activity location on the earth plane. So anyways, I ended up getting a mentorship with a world famous artist, not only less than 2 weeks after I had dropped out of school. Seemed like things were going incredibly well and right on track. I thought it was going to be years and years before I ever became an artist. Thought I'd have to save up, go back to school again, that kind of thing. But anyways, I met James Picard, who mentored me. And basically, I put everything into that. And then suddenly one day, on my way to the gym, I got in this horrible car accident where I couldn't walk and got rear-ended pretty intensely while I was in a Jeep. And the Jeep was not harmed at all. It was built like a tank. However, accidents in Jeeps tend to not fare that well for the person driving, and I took on like considerable whiplash and soft tissue damage. So basically I quit my job, never was able to go back. And I ended up having this long 6-year recovery, trying to get my health back and just being able to really like walk again on a continual basis. So about a month or 2 into my healing, I had already started to get lots of commissions as an artist, more than what I was getting paid for when I was working. So it really seemed like a sign from the universe that this was the direction to go in and to have faith. Basically, I had business cards created, my very first artist business cards, and I made plans with a girlfriend one day to stop in at my old work, the WAG, and to have a glass of wine. So I go and I pick up my business cards, have the glass of wine. My friend never shows up, and she seems to be significantly delayed. So since I already had a lot of friends where I worked, didn't really feel like a loner or anything like that. There was lots of loud music, jazz music playing. Thought I'd just kind of taken the ambiance for a while. And suddenly I began to have a very strange experience. It's very even hard for me to put it into words today. And this is, about 10 years after it happened. But it was something so unexplainable for so long that to tell it to the average person, I knew I'd be met with intense skepticism. So I kind of had to come to my deep universal truths myself before I was really able to share it with others. So I kind of lived as this closeted spiritual person for a long time, because part of the journey about being a spiritual person is learning how to express what you found inside and bring it through to the outer. So basically, I started leaving my body as I was sitting at the bar, and the music became very loud and I felt very uncomfortable, and I didn't know anything about us being divine beings and having a multi-bodied system. But what it felt like something was happening to me somewhere else, not in the room that I was in right now, but somewhere higher. I began to somewhat panic. I didn't think that I had been drugged because I had been watching my surroundings the entire time, and I also knew everybody that was around me, quite close friends. So I turned to my friends and I said, hey, look, you have to take me home, like immediately. I don't even think I can drive, even though I'd only had a glass of wine. Anyways, my friends were not so eager to let me go that easily, and they proceeded to talk me into playing some card games and stuff, and even challenging me to win my ride home. So I managed to do that. But at this point, I felt barely coherent. Strange things were going on. My hearing was going and then it would come back. My vision was going and then it would come back. It kind of felt like all my body systems were shutting off at the same time. It was very concerning. But I felt pretty safe because I was around good friends. Mm-hmm. So cut to the chase, I end up getting a ride home from a friend that I had worked with for quite some time, Mikey. And I had a standard car at this time. He was not familiar. So I had to kind of coach him on how to drive me home as another car followed. And basically, this is when the story begins to get profoundly weird. Basically, he stalls in the middle of an intersection late at night at around 10:30 p.m., but it's winter, so it's pitch black. And at first, we're very concerned, but it's so late at night, there's not a lot of cars. Suddenly, this semi comes barreling down in the opposite direction right as the lights are about to change. We get filled with tremendous panic as he's trying to depress the clutch and get going. And the last thing I remember seeing is the semi being like a foot away from my side, the passenger side. What happens after that is even stranger. And I didn't feel any pain. Basically, there was just a very, very intense, loud energy, and then a period of blackness, and something that kind of felt a little bit like a release, where I felt very cold and very lonely and very isolated for some time. It felt like I was crying. Suddenly something shifted, and I don't know what happened. It felt kind of like someone came down and grabbed me. And this is where the story deviates from a lot of people who have had near-death experiences. A lot of people that have had some sort of trauma or experience where they've died, they usually report not a lot. They'll see a light. A lot of people go through a tunnel and sometimes visualize that. Or very often you'll see a family member or a loved one who's already passed, sometimes a guide. They'll give you some advice for your life, and then the person is allowed to live again, or else it wouldn't be a near-death story. So this is where things get very different. And I actually have multiple timelines of events of things that happened, because when you are in timeless space, things don't happen in a linear fashion. Things happen kind of at the same time. And there actually ended up being more than one version of myself who was having these different various experiences at the same time. So in the main timeline where the primary amount of my consciousness was focused, suddenly I then appeared back in the same car. Although the person beside me now was different. It did look like my friend who was just with me. Except in this version, we just kept driving. Suddenly the stall didn't happen. We just continued on. And we were driving for what felt like an incredibly long time. And I only lived like 10, 15 minutes away, or maybe 20 with traffic, but at that time of night, less. So we began having this conversation, and I noticed that this being beside me, he seems bigger than my friend. He seems more sure of himself with his statements, more confident. He even seems like he has like some profound wisdom that he's hiding from me. And then I start to really look at him, and I notice that his skin is actually glowing. Now I start to think maybe I'm hallucinating. But on the same stance, I've never felt more awake in my life. So we begin to have this kind of back and forth dynamic where I'm kind of existing in this impression that maybe I'm drunk, and I'm kind of telling myself that this is all something weird. Although, if you have a couple glasses of wine, you don't usually hallucinate like a divine being. That's kind of like a miracle.
Yeah. So,
but we all have ego within us. And especially then I still had a considerable amount left. So my ego was doing an incredible job to diminish everything that began happening from this point on. We get into a long conversation, and basically I realize that he has appeared based on my request. And the evening before this event, I had been reading this profound book that I had been guided to because I was so injured and I could basically only lie in bed for long hours of the day. I had started reading an amazing book called Tales of Power by Carlos Castaneda. That book pushed my realm of what was possible, and I began using some of the teachings that I had learned in that book to command an experience where I would be removed from my body, since my body was the most painful place for me to exist at that time. It's not that I wanted to die, but I wanted to escape from the reality that I was in. And I wanted to experience higher planes. I wanted to feel weightless. I wanted to meet these beings that I had read about for myself, and I knew that they were there. I wanted to see what it was all about. So after that, after we have this conversation, it becomes clear that he had come at my request, and by some incredible grand act of a blessing from the universe, that I actually was being this gifted and experienced to travel astrally throughout the universe. So he never made anything easy for me. And even from that moment on, he made me do everything myself. And I had no idea how to leave my body. And I literally took a line out of the Carlos Castaneda book. And I remembered that at some point that Don Juan, his teacher, had taught him that you could rip a hole in the fabric of the universe and exit out. So not expecting any of this to work at all, but acting on pure faith, I reach out with my hand in front of the night sky. And to my surprise, it was like a soft see-through shower curtain that I actually was able to pull back. To my amazement and fear, I ended up having enough nerve to push through. And that is when the beginning of the journey really starts.
Oh, wow. So I shouldn't go to that restaurant, okay?
Unless.
No, actually, I did a paranormal investigation there. It was cool. The staff. It was probably about 2012, 13 or something. The staff would tell me about the wine bottles would leave that were over top of the door to the kitchen. They'd come in and they'd be on the floor the next day. It's an interesting place.
Strange things.
And the history of it, it's not that funky of a history. It's just the lumber. Some guys who ran a lumber company built it, and the wife is still hanging around in there upstairs, I believe. but it's kind of fun. But you have this. You go through your like one accident, and if I'm getting your timeline right, you've got an accident. You've read Carlos's book, and as you're getting better, you go out for a glass of wine or meet a friend, and then all this happens again, and you get into a second accident. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, what happened? This is me being a policeman brain. What happened to the guy in that accident? What happened to the driver?
So I did not know for the entire experience what happened to him. I go without, taking too much away from the book. I will say everything with him is okay.
Okay, good. See, that was the other thing too, is like, what path was he on to actually be placed beside you and not know how to drive that and get into that focus of energy at that point? I wonder what his life, where it had been before and now where it is going.
Everything with the universe is intentional. And it took me a while to learn that, especially when I continued to go through tremendous hardships after the experience. But everything is pre-aligned, and it's all really based on our personal karma that has been accumulated either in this life or in past lives. And, you can have good karma or bad karma. In a way, you could say that my bad karma was burning off with some of these accidents and pain and suffering that I had to endure in my body for years and years and years. In another sense, my good karma from past lives allowed this divine experience and spiritual gift to happen. As far as Mikey goes, he obviously has some past attainment where he also was ready for a certain level of spiritual awakening in this life, even though he was not very present for it. He was present at the beginning of the experience, but at some point, my guide assumed his body, presumably right at the time of the actual crash. So that was an intersection point in life. With that, there are key moments in life that we can never kind of deviate from. So from that moment on, my guide was essentially using divine permission to take his form. And before he showed me his true self, because I wanted to see what he actually really looked like before I agreed on any type of cosmic voyage, he said that he had taken the form of somebody that I knew so that I would be more comfortable.
Yeah.
So the divine knows your reaction to every different type of event. So when experiences like this happen, or even more mundane experiences, they try to plan your life in a way that's going to be the most harmonious for you. So they obviously wouldn't have chosen a form of somebody that I didn't really like, or that it would be unrealistic that I would ask him to drive my car. So they knew that Mikey was going to volunteer and that he would say yes. And I think that they also knew that after this had all happened and the dust had settled, I had to agree to come back into my life, although on some respect, I didn't really have a choice. But with that in mind, that Mikey also would have been spiritually open enough to agree to be in the book as well.
Oh, fascinating. That is kind of cool. We're talking to Sarazen Brooks. She's an artist and an author, and we're discussing a near-death experience. I always call them death experiences because I frankly think you die. You die, you come back.
With mine, it was a little bit different. With most people, I think that there's like an accident or something, and then, they flatline for a couple minutes, they get resuscitated, and they come back. That's kind of a typical, although I guess no near-death experiences are typical, but I actually considered calling the book a death experience.
Oh, very cool.
However, it just doesn't really have the same ring to it, I think.
No, and people who will Google near-death experience won't find it. So
exactly.
Yeah. And again, for the people who are, for my listener, it's Why Am I Here? A near-death experience with the Ancient of Days. Your experience in the car with the being you call your guide, have you had ever met your guide, your spirit guide, your primary spirit guide, I should say, or the guide that happened to be stepping forward at that point in your life? Have you ever met that guide before?
No, definitely not. I mean, I had read about, I hadn't even studied guides that much, to tell you the truth. Like, I was vaguely aware, angels exist, I think that God exists, but I hadn't really meditated on it for that long. I did not have any connection to guides. I mean, really, in the Carlos Castaneda book, he manifests a guru in tangible form. That's his teacher. So when I was connecting to the universe, I was just praying for this experience. I didn't know how exactly that was going to translate. But then when we end up going into higher planes after we cross through the universal shower curtain, if you will, it turns out that he was actually the most beautiful being that I've ever seen, and he was glowing blue. He did not look, he was humanoid. He looked human, but he looked much more than human, much more divine and radiating energies that I can't quite even describe. But everything that was coming off of him was so aligned with divine bliss and divine grace. And he did something very special to me, and he gave me the rare gift where I was able to feel pure, undilated, unconditional love. And until you have actually, I hope you don't have to die to experience this, but basically there's almost no one on the earth that embodies this truly, besides maybe an incredibly, incredibly advanced yogi out there. Yogananda was one of them, who is said to be the divine incarnation of love. But to experience that in tangible form while I was out of body, it has changed me for life. And after feeling that, I was able to put 100% of my trust into him, because I just had full, complete knowing that it wasn't possible for this being to harm me in any way.
Have you ever met, has that being come back into your life since? That you've seen?
He did actually. And that is what book 2 is going to be focusing around. But for a long time, I had no connection to him after that, even though I tried. I searched for him for about 7 years until I finally was able to find him again.
That's fascinating. Who you've described, and I've talked to over the years doing this and traveling to conferences and things, I've talked to a number of people, not only for near-death experiences, people who have experienced spirit guides and can see them. When I do readings for people, I communicate through oracle cards to their spirit guides, or I can stand in front of somebody and look at them and say, okay, you've got 5 angels on your right side. The third one over is tall and blue, and your grandmother or this grandmotherly lady is standing beside you. I can see that. But the tall blue or the bluish glowing ones, I always have been finding that's the Archangel Michael.
Michael is blue as well. That's true.
But would you feel the difference in your own mind? Do you think you'd feel the difference between that being Michael? Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's a very different, as you know, there's a very different type of energy that comes from an angel.
Yeah.
That comes from someone who's an ascended master. Michael has incredible strength. He has this incredible readiness and receptiveness to him, ever helpful and very angelic. Whereas Sanatkumara, he has a very dry sense of humor. He also is very aligned with power. But he is a little bit more laid back, as you'll read in the conversations that we have. He is very witty. Mm-hmm. He always has a very quick response. Not to say he's a trickster, but he has more of a human energy to him. And Sanatkumara, who is the Ancient of Days, he did live lifetimes on Earth, and he is big in yoga. He was featured in the Upanishads. So his lineage he already completed his lifetimes here, and now he helps from higher planes, and that's the definition of an ascended master.
Now, you're calling him the Ancient of Days. It's in the Kabbalah. It all refers to the God essence. Judaism, Book of Daniel, refers to being God, eternal. Christianity, it's basically the God the Father. It's different terms for the source of the universe.
Well, Sanatkumara has many different nicknames for his personal radiation from or emanation from God. He is called the Ancient of Days. A bunch of ones that are not on the top of my head. He's also the Prince of Venus. So his personality has gone by many different nicknames, although in truth, we are all emanations from the divine feminine or the divine masculine. And when God appears for you in whatever form it does, maybe it's Ganesh or maybe it's, Archangel Azrael, that's the particular portion of God that God has chosen to communicate with you, because God is omniscient. And he knows that particular part of himself will resonate with you the most.
Yeah, and I get Michael's very strong in me, as well as Heniel, because of my can't see me, but I'm kind of pointing at my female side right now. I've got a large female side to me, and she comes through. Sometimes I have two daughters in dealing with them. Long story, but
helpful.
Yeah, but those are what I've been describing, what I see at times, or what is helpful for me. And being a policeman, you've got Michael and the helper of helpers, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And doing that. My primary spirit guide, which is really weird, in June I found out my primary spirit guide is my higher self.
That's beautiful and rare.
That is the snake eating his tail. It's like, and I actually went to the planet he was from, which is a whole other. That's you can interview me on that one.
All right.
My present spirit guide, the guy. This is funny. It's a Gohart, which is Pan, the Greek god of the hillside. That's
lots to master there.
That is, he stepped in. I was in a spiritual timeout for a while, so he comes in and kind of takes over. It's been interesting. He's speaking of tricksters.
Yeah,
but that's kind of fun. Your spirit guides. Do you often communicate directly to them, or do you meditate to them? Okay, good.
Yes.
Do you find they rotate? Do you have different ones coming in at different
Absolutely.
points?
For a long time, it was Sanatkumara, and we had this incredible relationship like nothing I could ever match again. He was more of a father to me than anything I could almost say, and it's kind of funny how people could relate to that because he's disembodied. Mm-hmm. But it literally would feel like he was standing in my apartment with me, telling me exactly, always trying to usher me to make good changes and things like that. We get in arguments with each other, like just, when I'm not doing the things that I should and stuff like that. But now, I've kind of gone through a long transformative period this last year where my whole routine the last 3 years had just become old and stagnant, and it just was not filling me with the same fire. So after reading the book Autobiography of a Yogi, which I highly recommend, one of the top spiritual books ever, I became very attracted to the path of Kriya Yoga. And, Sanatkumara, the other way that you can tell that it's him is he's Indian. And there's a very strong Indian energy that comes from him. So with that in mind, kind of felt a lot of my yogic past lives really come to the surface, and I was looking for the quickest way home, the quickest way to transform myself and my full consciousness into self-realization. So I've taken this year-long yoga course, which I'm almost finished now, and now I've taken on Yogananda as my guru. So he's quite strong with me, but I'm also very attracted to Babaji. I'm very attracted to Sanatkumara, a lot of male guides right now, but I find that they really help to kind of give me a kick when I'm needing it. But I still pray to the divine feminine often. but more so just in her direct presence.
Your near death, this car accident that you were in, where you were then found yourself with your guide in Michael's body driving. What was the next thing after you're on this longer than normal drive and you're having this communication? What happens next?
So eventually we end up at my house, which was the destination. And we were waiting because the other car with our friends in it who was going to drive him home were following us. So we were waiting for them to show up, and they were taking forever. Like, we had time to talk for so long. So in this conversation, I kept asking him, like, do you want me to wait for them to come? And he was like, you can leave if you want. And I was like, well, no, okay, I'll keep you company. And then finally my vision started going again, and we started playing this game. In the car to pass the time. And it's a really stupid game. I'm embarrassed of myself 10 years ago for some of the stuff that I said to a divine being.
Was it truth or dare?
No, it was worse. It was, let's play drunk psychic. And it was kind of like an I Spy type of thing. And basically, suddenly he started guiding me to close my eyes. And I did. And this orange spiral started forming in front of one of my eyes, different colors and changing shapes. And it was pulling at me. I didn't understand what it was doing, so I pulled away. And he told me that the next time that it pulled, that I needed to push and go with it. And I felt very confused as to how my friend Mikey could know what I was seeing in my eyes, with my eyes closed, without me telling him. Obviously, this is not my friend. Mm-hmm. So the next time it pulled, I pushed, and I went fiery hot. And I opened my eyes, and it looked like nothing had changed. But with each one of these initiations that I went through, it took me a long time to figure out what had happened. So it was a burning off of my body and transitioning into higher planes. So at this point, it's not really fair to say that I'm existing on the earth anymore. This conversation is not really happening on the earth. We're not even in this dimension anymore. We're kind of like paused in timeless space where everything looks exactly the same as where we just were. So from there on, my guide, with his charming sense of humor, I ask him, casually, and I'm like, so you come here often? And he's like, actually, yes, I do all the time. And I was shocked, absolutely shocked to hear that. And he asks me, he says, like, do you trust me? Can we do this now? We need to get going. We're kind of like short on time. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do this. I'll rip a hole just big enough for me to go through. And he's like, just big enough for you? I'm like, okay, well, you could come too. So we kind of have this cute relationship, banter together right off the start. And from that moment on, I begin to experience the most unspeakable journey that I never thought I'd ever be so blessed to have. The type of thing that truly you read about in like fiction, or you see in like the most amazing superhero movie, or just, I don't know. But not a day goes by that I'm so grateful for that. And it's taken a lot of effort, not to fall asleep back again, even after witnessing kind of everything.
Here's the hard one. I'm going to ask you to describe a few of those without giving away your entire book.
A few of those experiences.
Yeah, when you pulled the curtain back.
Sure. Well, the first one was the most startling. And, I think we all kind of are grown up with the idea of heaven and hell. And like, what does that look like? Does that exist? If I die, do I go straight to God type of thing? What happens? And not the case. Not to say that those states don't exist, just not the way that most people think. So I proceeded to go into the astral world, where I'm with my guide, and we're suspended in air, and we're now bodiless. So we do have a body, we have an astral body, but it doesn't have the same density as our earth bodies do. It can levitate, float, it can transform and change, all of those things. Don't need to breathe or eat or sleep or anything like that. Great. So I'm very unfamiliar with how the bleep to operate this thing, and I have no idea what I'm doing, like absolute newbie, like trying to drive a car that you don't know how to drive. He asked me, and he says, so where do you want to go? And to me, I thought that was like the dumbest question, because I have no idea where I want to go. If I could go anywhere in the universe, I don't even know one location that is cool. Like, why don't you just tell me where to go? So he points this question to me, and I begin to meditate on it, and I kind of start thinking, well, where would I like to go? And something goes wrong, significantly wrong, and suddenly I guess I thought of something. I don't even know what I thought of, because it happened so fast. But because at this point you're existing by mere thought, you just have to think yourself somewhere else, and immediately you're there. So I get sucked, or fly, I don't know how to describe it, shooting incredibly fast, so fast I can't even see what's going on. There's like stars streaking by my face. I'm like scared, but I can't stop. And suddenly I find myself stranded on this planet that is absolutely foreign, so far away. My guide is not with me. And for lack of a better words, I end up calling it Planet Hell. It is hot. It is like hotter than any desert on Earth. There are no trees, no shrubs, like nothing, just sand dunes, like scorching hot sand dunes in a sky that the sun never sets. And while you don't need to eat, drink, or sleep or anything like that, my human mind kind of kept convincing me that I need those things. So at first I think maybe I'm going to starve to death. Oh, I'm so thirsty. And then I'm like, wait, I don't actually need any of those things. And basically I ended up wandering around there for what felt like decades, eons, even a small eternity. And I go through several encounters and dangerous lessons on there with the local wildlife, if you will, until my guide finally appears at the 11th hour, right as I'm about to swallow this disgusting bug because I'm so bored. So I had been there for a very long time, and it's hard to even communicate how long I was there. To me, in all honesty, it would probably feel like 1100 years or something like that, if you could estimate that. So I had given up all hope at this point. I had tried to leave in so many different ways. I tried to raise my vibration, many different things, with no success. So my guide comes, he appears at the last minute. In fact, he had been watching me the entire time, observing me to see what I was going to do. Then he pulls me out, and suddenly everything's not so bad, and he's kind of showing me these like cute quirks of the place, and it really just shows that everything is perspective. These animals that live there that I thought were absolutely disgusting and revolting ended up actually having like a family and were quite a part of the ecosystem. So I learned a lot with every stop that we made along the way. He never ceased to amaze me with the volumes of teachings that he could give me in such an incredibly short period of time. With that, I ended up getting better control, much better control as the experience went on. It definitely was like riding a bike, and suddenly things became familiar and I became very good at what I was doing. I did end up going to a place that was like nirvana. I went to Source, and I ended up staying there a little bit too long. I gravitated towards Source because of the amazing energy that was coming off of it. It felt like you were kissing the sun. And it felt like the sun was putting warmth into all of these pieces of you that previously had tension and stress and illness and grief and all of these things. So I kind of lied there, suntanning in front of it for a while, until suddenly two angels appeared and whisked me away. And they told me that I almost erased my consciousness, that if I would have stayed there much longer, that I would have just dissolved back into Source. So Source has many purposes. Not only does it create, but it also dissolves. It's kind of like the universal recycling plant, if you will. One of the last experiences that I'll share is, and probably one of the ones that I consider most sacred, is after this lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of testing that I went through and learning and growth, at the very end, I end up getting to meet this group of elders based on, I guess, some positive qualities that I had demonstrated. Although through the whole book, I really feel like I'm failing, like I'm fumbling, I'm failing. I don't know what is going on. I'm really just trying my best. So I then have to go in front of this group of incredibly advanced beings. It's like, this is the most intense interview that you've ever had that you're not prepared for. It's kind of like a dream that you wake up and you have to do a performance naked or something like that. So I go in front of these beings, and these beings are so advanced and so ancient that they just existed as like beams of light. They didn't have any body, but they all communicated telepathically. And I was kind of in this like Orpheum theater as they begin to ask me and bombard me with questions that I really don't know the answer to. And they hit me with a question that I was so incredibly not prepared for. And they said to me, "Why should we give you permission to advance?" And I felt that because everything exists using Lemuria, or being telepathic, they could read all of my thoughts that I was having, and I begin to think, I didn't even know what advancements was. Like, why are you asking me this question if I don't know the answer? And I couldn't shield them from my thoughts. So that was doubly embarrassing. But at this point, something very cool happened, and my higher self took over and began to, I was blacked out from seeing everything that she did to answer the question. But I got to see the beginning of it, and basically it felt like she began to sing. But saying that she sang, again, is just kind of using a term that points to a word, because my spiritual IQ was so low at the time of this experience that so much of what happened was beyond me. That being said, I still don't even know if I would know what she did today. There's a lot of other systems of communication and work and play and ways that being interact with each other in higher planes that we just don't have the translation for in this plane.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you describe that group of individuals, a group of beings, those light beings. I talked to an artist named Akiane Krameric, who at the age of 4 or 5, growing up in an atheist family, homeschooled, no television, no radio, no Bible in the house, comes out of the kitchen in the morning and say, "Hi, Mom, Jesus took me up into the universe, and there was a bunch of light being, like people that just glowed light, and they were talking to me." And she ends up, I don't know if you know who Akiane is, but she's a genius at art in oil painting and poetry, and at the age of 8 painted a portrait of Jesus called the Prince of Peace. It's huge. She was discovered by Oprah. Anyway, very, very interesting story about this young girl. She painted oil paintings at the age of 8 that somebody in their 60s or 70s of 50 years of oil painting, that's the equivalent to her talent. She talks about light beings too.
She sounds like a very old soul.
Oh yeah, she's definitely something. Her interview is going to be on after the next one after yours. So
amazing.
Drop by and take a listen to that one. But Akiane talks about light beings, but she didn't know because she's protected, homeschooled, never really ventured out into this. She had no way to describe them. But it's funny that you describe them almost exactly the same way she did. That just very wise, a lot of questions, a lot of communication, and then eventually, they're talking. You're at the little kids table, and they're at the big guy, and they're at the adults table, and eventually you end up working on a communication a form of communication. In your case, you had your higher self come in and said, I'll drive.
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, you just sit back, and eventually you will learn all this. But right now, it's gonna be one in going in one psychic ear and out the other kind of thing. It would be overwhelming, I would think, to go through something like that, specifically after you've just spent 1,100 years on a dry planet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that at that point, that was like 1 million years ago too. So
holy cow.
So I hope the next time, if I ever get to see them again, which I think I will one day, I hope I have some better answers to their questions. I think I probably will.
Yeah, I wonder, sometimes I've heard these can also be family members who have gone through various incarnations over thousands and thousands of years and going through the multiple dimensions, like where we keep coming back into, I won't say our lives, come into life with a physical body, and eventually we don't need it anymore. We just come back as light.
Well, anything is possible, and like I said, time is not linear, so that literally could be truth. In my own experience, the divide and the gap between us was so profound that to think that we were related in any way would have blown my mind at that time. But that being said, because we are, essentially emanations all from the same God or from the same source, then we are absolutely related no matter what.
Yeah. Fascinating. If anybody wants to drop by, go to sarazenbrooks.com. That's SARAZEN, or if you're where we live, ZEN. Sarazenbrooks.com, and look at the artwork she does. And again, look at her book, Why Am I Here? A Near-Death Experience with the Ancient of Days, which is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Anything with a near-death experience is fascinating. And this was only your first one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Like I've some of my friends who are psychics who are on those TV series like Psychic Detectives and things like that, every time they die like 4 or 5 times in their lives.
Really?
And every time they die, they come back and they're cranked up.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that. Well, the frustrating thing was, it seems like the death experiences happened really to get me on my plan. The second one ended up happening about 5 or 6 years later after the first. And I mean, it depends on how significantly you define them. If so, I've had 3 or 4, but definite experiences too. So they're later, which is also in the first book. I later get into a Headon Collision, which was pretty frightening, and definitely there was divine intervention there with Michael. But the more significant one was I actually was assaulted really badly, and I ended up being kind of left for dead on the streets of Kitsilano in Vancouver, with my brain hemorrhaging and cracked open within an inch of my life, and I lost consciousness for several hours until I woke up in the hospital. So that experience was different from the first, where I did not have a long cosmic amazing voyage during that one. That one was more like a hard hit. And I actually didn't know that I was going to live. It wasn't that I went anywhere during it. Everything just pretty much more or less went blank. I have little fragments of consciousness right when it happened, and I was very confused what was going on. I was talking to the person that was above me, asking for them to get help, although they did not. So that was pretty terrifying. Yeah. But that experience, changed me for my life in a very different way. At first, I felt very afraid of humanity, how someone could do that to another person. And it took me a long time to cope with that, and not only cope, but heal, and to actually discover why I am here, which lends the title of the book. You could say that maybe I was living my life selfishly entirely after the experience, because after the first out-of-body experience, I had been shown, essentially the answer to everything, but I had no way to place it into my life. I searched for teachers. I tried to read the right books. But after about 7 years or so of looking, I got pretty lost, and I wasn't able to really get on my highest path in a strong, tangible way. After the second near-death experience where I was left for dead, I really felt like I had lost everything. I had significant brain damage that took me a year to recover from. So I wasn't really able to paint. I couldn't leave the house. I was just traumatized and also suicidal as a result of, probably the brain damage and the trauma. So it took a lot of strength and fortitude to find the courage to read that book that I had written almost 6 years before. And to that date, I had never read the book. Basically, when the first experience happened, my uncle, who was the only person I told in detail, he strongly guided me to record the entire experience into a tape recorder, which he then translated into the book, which took up about 100 solid pages of dialogue and experience. So I had never been able to look at it again after 6 years. It frightened me. I was scared. I was crazy, even though I knew I was not. But it was kind of like just being revealed like Pandora's box and feeling like your dial-up computer of your brain is not able to process such high-speed information. So after, being suicidal and having brain damage, I prayed to God to give me the answer as to why all these horrible things were happening to me. Why was I facing such poverty and starving if I had been shown the secrets to the universe? Why had I gone so far off my path? And I did receive a message after hours of prayer. And prayer was not something I did often. And the message that I received, and I heard it clearly in my right ear, was, you already have a note from your guides and it's in your book. So I sat down that day and I surrendered and I read the whole thing, and I was shocked first I was happy and delighted reading all the funny parts of our conversation, but the most shocking thing was I actually prophesized my brain damage 6 years prior. And I prophesized the Headon Collision as well. And that scared me. I was frightened about that because at one point in the book, I look into all my possible futures and they came true. So at that point, any shed of ego that was telling me what happened to you wasn't real, you hallucinated it, it was a very long dream, was gone, completely gone. There was no possible way that I could be that psychic, that I would know that something would happen to myself 6 years from now with that detail. Even the color of the car was silver, and I didn't even have a silver car at that time. So I was impressed at the divine for holding up to its end of the bargain, basically. That is amazing. And I'm sorry to hear about the assault. It's one part of your life I didn't know. It wasn't up there with being afraid of spiders, mind you. I'm sorry for that. Spiders are pretty scary, so. Yeah. Well, don't eat them on a burning hot planet either. The change, the actual, to have those notes in your first book, to be able to go back and go, oh, well, I should have seen that coming. But, that's us with our hindsight. The ability to actually have that information at your fingertips and then have it pointed out to you, that is fascinating. Now that you had those little prophecies back then, is there anything else that's coming up, or are you pretty well done with you fulfilled all your prophecies from the information in the first book? I think my higher self has quite an interesting sense of humor, and she tends to use car accidents to get me back on track. Although actually it is like this for many people, although they don't realize the adjustment that is being made in their life. Car accidents, even illness, things with health. So with that in mind, I do know a considerable amount of my future plans, and I have known it for quite some time. So I've been building up to that for the last for the last 3 years working overtime. So there will be many things coming forward, some which I can announce, some which I can't. The art is something that will keep going strong no matter what. And I'm working towards painting the Ascended Masters and Higher Realms, which will be on the table next year. But beyond that, I will also write book 2 and book 3, which will be a continuation of the first book, and how that has translated into meditation and still reaching those states while still in my body.
Oh, that's great. And again, for the listener out there who's interested in seeing some of her art, sarazenbrooks.com, go check out the Infinite Universe series that she's painted. I'm talking like you're not here. Sarazen's painted. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm speechless. It is. It's really good. You're a pretty darn good artist. Thank you. I've always liked your stuff, which is funny because I'm actually as you've been talking, for some reason I picked up my pencil and I started doodling swords for some reason. So I'm going to send them to you and see if they mean anything to you. But anyway, that's cool. That's between Sarazen and myself. It was honestly, they're swords. They're some weird thing, and I think it had something to do with us talking about Michael, but I don't know what. So every so often I'll doodle something for no apparent reason and think, yeah, I really should share that with somebody. Sarazen Brooks, you are an experiencer of something that I think many people would absolutely be terrified of when they do experience it. But to find yourself in a position where you're getting that physical slap in the head, like, hey, get back on path. This is where you're supposed to go. And in the way you describe them as being in car accidents or a physical something damaging your physical being to get your attention. As your father, I would say, as somebody who's a little protective about you, I go, you know what? How about you pay attention a little bit more so you don't have to get clunked on the head or get into a car accident. But I think you're already doing that. You are meditating more. You've identified a yogi. You are opening yourselves up and communicating and raising your vibration, which is where you're supposed to be going. That is your path. So let's hope these slap in the back of the head or ripping the front of your car off is not going to happen anymore.
Absolutely. I don't think there's a whole lot of need for it. These days, I'm living a life of service. So I do sessions for people as well, although I don't advertise them. But I bring through the Ascended Masters and I bring through spirit guides and I help people connect to their highest plan. So I typically only work with usually the more advanced soul who's already on the path and wants to come into their gifts and really know how they can be of service. So that's something that has really changed my life. And I'm always looking at different ways to help others. And one day this might materialize as becoming an actual spiritual foundation. When
you're working with people and you're working through spirit, do you see things around them? Like, do you see color? Do you, like, I see when I look at somebody, I will get a relative, a deceased person, a loved one come through, and I describe it as like if you and I try to remember somebody we went to high school with, and you picture that person in your head, you usually picture them from the waist up, and unless they're showing you something around their feet, it's just more of a thought than an actual three-dimensional being. Do you get that with spirit guides too? Because for the life of me, I don't see spirit guides. I've seen them. I've seen a couple of my own during a what do you call it? I did a third eye activation, and now since June, I've actually been seeing, like, I don't know if they're guides. They're more spirit protectors, about a car length behind the person, usually about 6-7 feet tall. But I don't know if those are guides or not. I'm still a rookie at that.
Well, the Venusians are quite tall. They are about 6-7 feet tall, so that could be them. Although I'm not necessarily seeing that right now. I see a variety of things, to be honest. At times, I've actually seen spirit guides tangibly with my eyes open. So there have been, which is the way the book ends. actually, is I have a ascended master who appears to me in tangible form. So, but typically when that happens, that is usually aligned with cosmic permission and something important is about to happen. When I'm working in sessions with clients, I see different variations of beings. Sometimes it's an impression and a thought. I have, however, pretty perfect clairaudience, so I can hear perfect hearing of them speaking to me. I even hear their accents, or if it's a male voice, a female voice. If it sometimes I've even heard like an Australian accent, cool. which was a different type of guide. But I do see clearly as well. So I remove blockages from people, different things that are on their field, your aura, your third eye, that type of thing. I do past life healing, opening up doors of abundance. It's kind of like a limitless range. So I just have to trust that when I'm in session, that I'm given the gift to see whatever I need to see at that moment.
Are you bothered by anything? Let's say a person that has passed and not crossed over, do they kind of bother you for help at all?
I have had that, but it doesn't bother me. Yeah, so I have done some of that, but not so much in this life, although that was a job of mine in a different life, was to help people cross over.
Oh, interesting. I get a lot of people who are very high vibration and just kind of coming into it, like using the base term empath. You wake up between 3 and 4:30 in the morning because that's the veil thins and they're standing at the foot of your bed kicking and say, "Hey, Sarazen, get up. You got to help me." And you wake up going, I think you all should leave. You had to go. But it comes to those a lot of times who least expect it, and
absolutely,
it's awkward. Like in crowds, or I'll be talking to somebody, but I don't see the dead, quote unquote, the dead anymore. The ones that haven't crossed over. I used to see them a lot when I was a kid, and I did bring one home from down in Steveston, British Columbia. Paranormal investigation. I brought home a carpenter from the 1930s who was standing at the foot.
Oh my goodness! Is that like adopting a stray cat or something?
No, you know how you. We're out. Shaw Cable, which is one of the cable stations out here, wanted to follow around a paranormal group. So of course they wanted to do it in the middle of the night because they don't understand that those beings are there 24/7 anyway. But because it's dark, so it's spookier. So we went out to a place and it was raining and it was a long drive home. And instead of doing a little bit of a meditation and a please, I'm good, please stay here, when I left, I just went home. Got into bed.
Okay, so you welcomed him.
Yeah, he came home with me. So the next
that's kind of funny.
But yeah, it's one of those things. And of course I put myself in those positions. I'm constantly going to ghost conferences. I'm down in Tombstone, Arizona, in 1800s haunted rooming houses, and
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was supposed to be at Port Gamble, Washington this weekend. I still might go down there for that ghost conference. Was on the Queen Mary, had the sheets of my bed pulled off the first night. But that was somebody coming through and saying, "Hey, I really need your help, and I know what you can do. So we're just trying to get your attention." So once we figured that out, it was all cool, and we crossed them over actually a few weeks ago. But
good.
Yeah, I don't get that as much. I don't see the dead, I should say, as much, like full on standing in front of me anymore. I did when I was younger. Now I just kind of feel it. But the people I do get are your grandmother, who has already crossed over but volunteered to be kind of your in-between, your spirit guides and you. Are
you talking about my grandma?
No, I'm not.
Okay, because she is quite powerful.
But I get the person that is the gut feeling, the goosebumps, because until your vibration is high enough for your guides to connect with you directly, you usually have a volunteer to come in and kind of be your in-between and pass on messages. So I get those all the time.
When my sight was first awakening, I didn't get a lot of the dead, but I had a mix of good beings and very dark beings coming to me to interfere and attack me and all sorts of different things. And that lasted for about 3 years, 3 or 4 years. So I had to learn a lot of psychic self-defense, because the more that you become aligned with your gifts, the more that the opposing energy in the universe also senses your awakening and wants to stop it. And that's something connected to the 3 gunas in yoga, which is the 3 types of energy that is always acting upon everything. So with every action, there's a reaction. Now, however, I'm in such a state of grace most of the time, due to my alignment, that I'm able to easily block like almost everything that comes my way.
What are the methods for blocking that?
So very basic technique that's super easy that anybody can do is, number 1, if you're scared and you're going to sleep to bed and you feel a dark energy on you or surrounding you or anything like that, you can write the word Om, except it's A-U-M. That's the traditional way to say it. And that is the first spoken word in the universe. That is the word of creation. It is the word of God. It is the word of the divine feminine. It's all protective. So you just trace it on your finger of your pillow 3 times as you're thinking about divine God and blessings just to protect you. So 3 times. That has protected me many, many times when I've been too tired to shield or meditate or make any calls. There's also protective stones. I'm a big fan of smoky quartz. I usually often sleep with a piece of smoky quartz with me almost always. So that's super grounding, very protective. Another thing that you can do as well, using the same word Om, is sitting down or standing up, you put your hands out in front of you touching. And while saying Om, you make a circle around you, touching your hands behind you. And you do that again 3 times. There's a lot with the number 3. A more advanced technique is actually shielding and clearing, which is shielding is visualizing an orb of light around you. There are millions of different types of shields, and I have been learned and gifted many different versions of them. But a very good go-to one that's kind of good for everything is called the shield of invisibility, invincibility, invulnerability. And you call that in while you're visualizing the shield, preferably surrounding your whole house. If you can't visualize it surrounding your entire house, visualize it just surrounding your field and your aura. But it's better if you can stretch it out over time to include your whole space. So you hold the shield for as long as you can, visualizing its strength. You can even visualize things bouncing off of it because of how strong it is, while also asking help from your guides to strengthen the shield. And the last one, which is more of a clearing technique, is sacred fire. And sacred fire has been used for a long time. There's mentions of it through the ages in basically every type of spiritual book that you can imagine, though very few explain what it is. And basically in our plane, in the 3D plane, fire has a connotation of being something that is destructive. However, in higher planes, in the 5th dimension, fire is transformative and it changes things. So divine fire can be used to elicit a numerous amount of results. But for the sake of this talk, I'll just talk about violet flames. Violet flames are the most transformative flames that are responsible for transformation, transfiguration, and transmutation. So that has the ability to completely clear the energy around you from anything nefarious. If there's a dark entity or spirit or being, or even if just you have been going through a hard time yourself, if you've been going through a breakup or depression or a lot of stress, that invites these forces in, and it also makes the vibe of your place pretty low. So using the violet flame, there's lots of meditations online for that on YouTube. You just search violet flame meditation and a bunch of them will come up. You visualize with your eyes closed or open this beautiful violet flame that's going through you, going through your whole entire body. It's clearing your sight, your third eyes. Never mind that, it's also clearing your whole sacred space. So with that, the shielding and clearing, if you even do that for 20 minutes, you're looking really, really good. And that's enough for permission for most people to get protected. However, if you're listening to this, and if you are one of those people who is waking up and exceptionally coming into your gifts, then you may need to sit in that meditation for longer, because like I said, the more that you are advancing, the more that there's also these other forces out there that want to kind of hold you back.
Wow. Thanks very much about that. I appreciate that. I'm sure my listener does too. I put a bubble around myself, paint it silver, and then put kind of a brown coating on the inside, so it looks like a mirror from the outside, I think. So I'm kind of,
yeah, well,
but it's,
we can create whatever shield, feels good for us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I've done it a lot. I find that the dead adults will stay out of my room and leave me alone, but it's the kids who are still just love and light. I'll fill my room with love and light and put a boundary on it and my intention out there that nobody can bother me. This is my own personal time. And I was in a haunted kind of bed and breakfast hotel, really nice one out in Wheeler, Oregon, the old Wheeler Inn, and a little girl in the middle of the night says, "Daddy." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's creepy." And,
yeah, I've had things like that too.
But the kids will come through, but all the dark stuff and the adults will all stay out.
Yeah, no, kids definitely have more of a level of purity. But you know what? Also, I'm seeing that this is really your path that you've chosen for this life, is to have a lot of interactions with beings who are kind of in the in-between state. It's a lot of what you're investigating, and what you think about, you bring about. So I do think it's kind of part of your job description that you have right now. I've been told that it's part of my path right now. Yes.
Things have changed a lot since was in a bad car accident when I was 16 and saw my first full-on dead people standing there, to going through as a policeman, interacting with a lot of dead people, and which is a whole other issue. That's another one. That's me being interviewed for another hour. Dealing with dead people, but the different shielding, it's fascinating, and the violet flame part is very, very. I am going to research a little bit more of that, because I think the purity, when you said that, I got this overwhelming kind of purity thing. The other thing is, I got told that, is this true that you are going to start putting meditations on YouTube?
Oh, wow. I don't know where that came from. That did my guides just tell you that?
No, I wrote it down. It said,
interesting.
Meditation, and you putting together some meditations for YouTube. But anyway, that's what I just.
You know what? I get. It's funny that you say that, because my girlfriend had been talking about these guided meditations that she'd been listening to, and she was trying to offer them to me. I was like, no, I don't really use those. Like, I'm okay.
Yeah, I do them myself.
Yeah, but I have recorded them in the past, both for clients and for myself to help move myself forward. I've actually been big on subliminal tapes that I've used for myself to help elicit certain changes in me. But there's all different types of meditations that can be done. So I will tune in for that. Thank you for giving me something to tune into.
Yeah, see where that bounces out, because that's, as you were talking about going to YouTube and looking something up, I just wrote down, Sarazen guided meditations YouTube. It's like, oh, well, maybe I wonder, who knows? Maybe I'm supposed to point it out. But
I love it.
It's something you have to do. And when is your are you in the process of your next book right now?
So there are partial drafts done for book 2 and book 3. Right now, because I had a kind of arduous move across the country, the last 4 months, just finished getting set up. I'm taking some time to paint right now and to really get creatively inspired again. I just found writing the first book, it took me a year. It was so creatively stimulating in one way, but I'm still not ready for those long hours on the computer yet. So I'm hoping that come around January, February, that's when I'll be back in full book creation mode.
So 90 days.
So don't say it.
No,
roughly about that. So I mean, if it was this time next year, that it came out, that's quite possible.
Yeah. I would just do what you did the first time. Just say it all into a recorder and give it to your uncle.
Right, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. Here, could you just type all this stuff up? It's 100 hours. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, well, he's been an absolute godsend. I couldn't have done it without him. And he not only designed it, but he helped edit it. And it's true that the universe will send you an angel to help you accomplish your plan. So I'm forever grateful for him. And if anyone's looking for design work or book editing help, he's the guy to go to for sure.
I was told 6 years ago or 5 years ago I was supposed to write a book about myself, but
amazing.
I don't even read books, let alone write them. Good Lord.
Hey, that's the way that I felt too at the time. I had not read a book since college, which was just, medical texts. So that's part of the reason why it took me 10 years, was because I felt, I had been shown something so sacred, so special and divine. How do I communicate what I've experienced when I can't even type a paragraph without a whole bunch of grammatical errors and punctuations? And basically it just happened one day. Just one day I felt ready. I had been meditating for years though. I had been meditating for 3 years, and suddenly the time was now. Yeah. So, when the time comes, you will be in tune enough to sense that moment. And you have the kind of book that I would read anyway. I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I need to read. I don't read fiction. I read nonfiction. And yes. So I'm going to cheat. I'm getting the Kindle edition of your book. No worries.
And again, for the listener, it is Why Am I Here? A Near-Death Experience with the Ancient of Days. Author Sarazen Brooks. Please go to her website, sarazenbrooks.com. Look at her art. My gosh. It's the Infinite Universe is an absolutely wonderful series. I can't go off anymore on this. It's I've followed your art for years. You're a wonderful person, and I really appreciate you coming by.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was incredibly rewarding to do, and I'm so happy that we are more officially connected now.
Okay. Thanks, Sarazen. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Night, and I live in the absence of light, and my shadow has life of its own, watching you while you sleep all alone.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey. Let's be careful out there. Far over the snow, what are those voices? They sing as they go. What are those voices? Look up for the mountains. Through the hail, like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. We are after you, dead or alive. We are out to get you, dead or alive. And forget your toes. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man that after now. Run through the hail. Angry wolves on the trail. Dead or alive, we are out to get you, dead or alive. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after. No!
I see dead people.